Lilah believed in curses, even growing up in a town like Cold Brook tucked beneath the claws of the Allegheny Mountains, where the woods breathed stories and shadows moved a little too long. But that changed the night her grandfather died. It happened during the lunar eclipse of November 22-5. The old man's farmhouse, inherited in fragments through generations, stood at the edge of Hollow Pine Road. Locals whispered about it. Of course they always had. They said it had been built wrong, cursed from the beginning, that its blueprints had never matched its actual layout, that its rooms shifted, just a little, when no one was watching. Lilah had returned home to bury him. She hadn't expected to stay more than a week, but when the eclipse began, its bloody curve slicing across the moon like a closing eye, she found something in the house that hadn't been there before. A door, not just any door. It was tall, unnaturally so. Old wood, warped with moisture, darker than anything else in the house. Carvings that didn't look like any language she recognized twisted across its surface, jagged and insectal, like they'd been burned into the grain by some clawed hand. It was in the upstairs hallway, replacing the linen closet. She didn't remember it being there. No one did. The air around it felt wrong, thicker, colder, like it had stolen the warmth out of the hallway. And it was humming low, almost inaudible, but enough to make her teeth ache. The hum pulsed with the rhythm of her heartbeat, and something behind the door shifted like it had noticed her. She should have left. She should have burned the whole damn house. But Lilah had always been curious, just like her grandfather, just like everyone in the family line that had died during an eclipse. Lilah stood in front of the door for a long time. The humming behind it grew louder, no longer just felt, but heard. It was a wet, guttural vibration, like something large, breathing slowly on the other side of a veil. She reached out instinctively, fingers trembling, the air buzzing around her hand like static. The knob was ice cold. She jerked her hand back. The rest of the house was silent, too silent, the kind of silence that settles over freshly dug graves. No distant hum of the fridge, no creak of old floorboards. Even the wind outside had gone still. The eclipse had reached full coverage. Moonlight was gone, replaced by a suffocating darkness that clung to the windows. Then came the knock from the inside. 3 slow, heavy raps. Lilah's breath hitched. She stepped back, and the door opened just a crack. A sliver of pitch-black darkness poured out like smoke, and with it came a sound that would never leave her again. The chittering of thousands of tiny legs, like centipedes crawling across a mirror, like nails across wet tile, like something alive with too many joints. A voice, childlike and garbled, whispered from the darkness, "You left us here." Lilah turned and ran. She didn't stop until she reached the old root cellar beneath the kitchen, slamming the door behind her, her chest heaving, lungs burning. She grabbed her phone to call someone, anyone, but the screen was nothing but static, buzzing violently until it burned her hand and shut off. The humming followed her, so did the whispers. They were everywhere now, inside the walls, under the floors, in the pipes. And then she remembered her grandfather's journals. She tore open the floorboard beneath the fireplace where she used to hide as a child, and sure enough, there they were, 30 leather-bound books, moldy and yellowed. The top one had a single word scrawled in desperate, frantic handwriting: "Run." But she didn't run, she read, and the first entry, dated November 8, 1982, during the last full lunar eclipse, chilled her to the core. "I saw the door again. Tonight. It's not part of the house. It's older than wood, older than time. It comes when the moon dies, and it brings them with it. If you see the door, you have one night. After that, they make a room from your memories, and eat you from the inside out." Lilah closed the book, hands shaking. The house creaked. A voice echoed from upstairs, her own voice calling softly, "Lilah, come look, come remember." And that was when she realized It wasn't the door that had appeared. It was her. Lilah should have run. Every instinct screamed at her to leave the house, to claw her way through the boarded-up windows if she had to sprint barefoot into the woods, to never look back. But something stronger held her in place. Not fear, not curiosity, recognition. She had seen that door before. Not in dreams, not in childhood, somewhere deeper. It wasn't a memory, it was a wound. The humming had now become a pulse that matched her heartbeat. Every step toward the stairwell felt like sinking deeper into quicksand. The old house groaned as if it resented her return. Upstairs, the air was heavier. The wallpaper rippled as if breathing. The photos on the hallway walls had changed. Where once were black and white portraits of ancestors, now hung frames filled with mirror shards, and in each, her reflection smiled back. With someone else's eyes. With someone else's eyes. The door was... Inside was a room that didn't exist in the blueprints of the house. She stepped through the threshold. The door slammed shut behind her. The room smelled like old teeth and vinegar. Mirrors lined every wall, broken, jagged, mismatched hand. In each one, she saw herself at different ages. 5, 12, 20, 30. In some she was crying. In others, screaming. In one, she was missing her eyes. And in the center of the room stood a chair made of bones. On it sat a child-sized figure covered in burlap. Head tilted, hands resting in its lap. It wasn't breathing. It wasn't moving, until she spoke. "Who are you?" The figure twitched on then, in her voice. "You already know." Lilah stepped back, but the floor had changed soft, wet, like flesh. Something pulsed beneath it, something massive. She tried the door, locked. She turned back. The burlap figure stood and dropped its hood. It was a little girl, but not just any girl. It was Lilah, at age 7, face pale, eyes sunken and black, lips sewn shut with crimson thread. The stitched lips quivered as they tried to speak. The mirrors around the room shattered inward, exploding like gunshots. Shards flew through the air, but instead of glass, they were made of teeth. Dozens of human teeth clattered across the floor, some still with gum and root attached. Lilah screamed and fell, cutting her arm open on something sharp, blood-soaked. The floor, the younger version of herself, moved closer, and that's when Lilah remembered what she'd buried. The crawl space. The night her parents died. The voices that told her to lock the door and never open it again. She hadn't imagined the voice when she was a child. She hadn't imagined the thing beneath the stairs. She had just grown up and forgotten. Now the house was reminding her. No, punishing her. The child's stitched lips whispered again, and Lilah understood. "You left me behind. You made me rot in here." She backed against the wall, breath rapid. Her older reflection in one cracked mirror pointed toward something behind her. The bone chair had been replaced by a hatch in the floor, a hatch she didn't remember ever being there. Or maybe she did. Something screamed beneath it, something with her voice. The scream from beneath the hatch wasn't human. It started as Lilah's voice, but it twisted, stretched, and fractured into something feral, something ancient, something that knew how she tasted from the inside. She stared at the hatch, hands trembling, her breath fogging in the freezing air of the mirror room. The 7-year-old version of herself stood unmoving now, head bowed, lips still sewn shut with glistening red thread. The mirrors had stopped vibrating, but her reflection in each one kept turning its head on its own, as if trying to look at something just out of frame. And then they all pointed at once, down. To the hatch. It was carved from the same gray wood as the rest of the house, but the grain moved like skin over muscle. There were nail marks on the handle, as if someone had tried to claw their way back up. She didn't want to open it, but she knew she would. Her fingers reached out like they were no longer hers. The moment she touched the hatch handle, the air changed. A whisper ran through the floorboards and shot up her spine like cold electricity. The light in the room dimmed to a pulsing black-red hue, as if the house were breathing through every wall. She pulled. The hatch opened with a shriek of rusted hinges, and the smell of something freshly dead. A narrow staircase spiraled downward, into pure darkness. The kind of dark you could choke on. She hesitated. Then the reflection in the only unbroken mirror smiled, and her 7-year-old doppelganger stepped forward and whispered not aloud, but directly into her mind, "Go meet the rest of us." Lilah descended, each step squelched like raw meat. The staircase narrowed with every turn, forcing her to crouch, then crawl. The walls dripped with condensation or maybe sweat. A faint humming came from below, low and harmonic, almost musical, like a lullaby from hell. And then the walls opened. She found herself in a vast chamber that should not have fit beneath the house. A catacomb of sorts, made of mirrors, bone, and flesh. The walls breathed, the floor moved, and in the center was a cradle, made of ribs. Inside it, a baby, crying, but it was her cry, her newborn wail. She remembered it. She had heard it once before in a recording her mother played, and next to the cradle stood a woman without a face, wearing her mother's houssecoat. The faceless woman raised a hand. Behind her, figures emerged from the walls, malformed, shadowy, versions of Lilah at every age, whispering, weeping, dragging their limbs. Some with their eyes sewn shut, others with their mouths peeled open too wide. They surrounded her. She couldn't breathe, and then the baby in the cradle opened its eyes. Black. Void. Bottomless. It spoke in 1,000 voices at once, including her own, her mother's, her father's, and a dozen she had never heard before. "You left us in the dark. You made us forget. Now remember, ... and feed us." The ground split. Lilah fell and landed in her childhood bedroom, except everything was wrong, upside down. The bed was bolted to the ceiling. The window was bricked up with human teeth, and her childhood toys sat in a circle, their heads turned backward. One of them spoke, a stuffed rabbit. It whispered, "He's still in the walls." From behind her, the sound of something crawling, something big, scraping long claws across the plaster. Her father's voice, but warped. "Sweetheart, ... We never really left the house." It was his voice, but not his warmth. "Sweetheart, open the wall." Her father rasped again. Lilah turned again. Lilah turned. There was just the bulging, breathing surface of the wall itself, straining like a swollen organ ready to burst. The wallpaper was yellowed and sagging, pulsing in and out with each breath it took. The voice came again, this time closer, as though it were speaking through her skull. "You were supposed to hear us when you were 6, but you forgot." Suddenly, both sides of the wall cracked open. Fingers, dozens of them too long, too jointed, peeled back the drywall like wet paper. From the yawning gash, something stepped through, not walked, stepped through, like it had always been part of the room, and merely rearranged itself into a body. It was tall, humanoid, but utterly wrong. Every bone stuck out too far, every limb bent just slightly off, as if built by someone who'd seen a human body only once through a dirty window. Its face was her father's, but it was inside out, where his mouth should have been. There was an eye milky white, darting in every direction. Where his eyes had once been, 2 tiny mouths wept constantly, drooling black fluid that hissed as it hit the floor, and it smiled with its whole chest splitting, open down the sternum to reveal a vertical grin made of teeth that weren't human. "We tried to raise you, right?" the thing said, in that stitched-together chorus of voices. Lilah couldn't move. The room sank. The ceiling, once her floor, began to ooze downward like tar, dragging her bed and toys with it. She was waist-deep in it before she realized she wasn't sinking in tar, she was sinking in memories. The voice spoke again. "Remember what happened to Mommy in the basement?" And the scene shifted. Suddenly, Lilah was 6 years old again, standing at the top of the basement stairs. The door creaked open by itself. A thin line of red light glowed beneath it. Her mother was down there, crying, begging, screaming. She saw herself small, trembling walk down the steps, each one groaning underfoot. But this time, she kept going. She descended all the way to the thing beneath. Something she'd blocked from her memory so long ago that it became part of her nightmares. It wasn't just the house that had been haunted. It was her family, bound to this land, this structure, this curse. They had lived here before. The house even existed, in shacks, in tunnels, in pits. Her ancestors had called something up from beneath the earth and bargained with it. Your blood remembers. The voices whispered, the baby in the bone cradle, the sewn-lipped girls dot the mirrors. All of it was her. Her mother hadn't fallen sick. She had been offered a trade for protection, for power, for a child born with the sight. Lilah had been that child, and when she was 6, she had seen the truth and chosen to forget. But forgetting is not forgiveness. The creature lunged. Lilah stumbled back, but instead of hitting the wall, she crashed through a mirror, not glass memory. She shattered it with her body, and she woke up on the kitchen floor, panting, alone. The house was still, again, silent, but she knew it wasn't over. The thing in the walls had followed her back. The others, her other selves, were whispering just behind the door frames. And worst of all, something was crying upstairs. A child, her child. She didn't have a child, but her body remembered being pregnant. Her hands instinctively touched her belly, and it kicked. There had never been an ultrasound. No baby clothes, no due date. But something inside her was alive now, and it wasn't human. The camera had been rolling for over an hour now. Somewhere, deep within the crawlspace, under the altar, now shattered from Madison's impact, Ben held the lens aloft with a trembling hand. The chat was still flickering, but less now. Viewers had dropped off in droves. Those that remained only typed one word over and over: run. Madison coughed up blood as she pressed her back to the wet stone wall. Whatever had come out of Jesse's mouth, whatever had worn his skin like a mask, was still pacing the aisle above, whispering in some language that made the air throb. Ben, she croaked. Is it ... still watching? He nodded. It's looking through the live stream at them, not just us. Above them, the voices of the viewers began to speak back, not just in the chat but through the audio feed. Voices of children, of old men. A chorus of distorted screams. Laughter that looped and bent unnaturally. Ben turned the camera on himself, eyes hollow, mouth slack. It's in the stream now. It doesn't need the church anymore. It doesn't need us. Madison stared, pale. Then we kill the signal. They both turned toward the exit, but there was no exit anymore. Only that thing, that hideous, eyeless shell wearing Jesse's bones, blocking the archway with its arms outstretched, smiling too wide. It whispered, let them see. Let them all see. Suddenly, the camera screen flashed red. A timer appeared, counting down from 6 to 66. What is that? Madison gasped. Ben's hands shook. It's not from my stream. Overlay. That's not from me. As the numbers ticked down, the walls bled, yet split. The stones wept crimson. An ancient Latin chants began to echo from the speakers that hadn't worked in decades. Then the pews exploded into flame, and the viewers watching at home, those foolish enough to still have their screens open, saw a message burn across the feed in jagged text. You have been marked. Do not look away. Do not turn it off. This is your mass now. One by one, the live stream viewers began screaming. Some collapsed in front of their screens. Others clawed at their eyes. Some simply vanished. The camera kept rolling. Ben whispered, we're too late. Madison grabbed the last can of lighter fluid and flung it onto the altar. Then let's drag this bitch back to hell with us. She struck the match. Everything went white. AFTR mate, 2s later, the ruins of St. Aurelian's Church were cordoned off. Officials said it was a gas explosion, but every few nights, if you scrolled far enough down the livestream archives of Hexstream TV, you'd find a broken video thumbnail, no title, no runtime, just a still frame of Madison's tear-streaked face whispering something. If you clicked it, the screen stayed black for 66 seconds, and then her voice cracked and distant. "He's not done streaming." And in the reflection of her wide, terrified eyes you'd see yourself, still watching,